Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a very good morning to everyone. Today, my group and I will be presenting our final year project entitled Factors of Sleep and Stress Level Among Working Adults in Johor Bahru. An article by Klein in 2013 stated that sleep quality can be defined as to when an individual is satisfied with their overall sleep experience. National Night Sleep Foundation stated that on average, a person only gets 6.5 hours of sleep in Malaysia. Brunvel's 2010 found that shorter sleeping time and lower subjective sleep quality are associated with increased risk of stress symptoms. According to an article written by Ricardo Blog 2007, stress is defined as an adverse reaction people have to excessive demands or other sorts of demand imposed on them by the Health and Safety Executive, HSE. Work-related stress is thus believed to happen when there is a mismatch between the job needs and the individual's resources and capacities to meet those demands. On the other hand, sleep is defined as a condition of the body and mind that typically recurs for several hours every night, in which the nervous system is relatively inactive, the eyes closed, the postural muscles relaxed, and the consciousness practically suspended. Another article that was referred to is an article from 2016, which is written by Wipawan Pensukan. It stated that reduced sleep duration and quality are considered to be endemic in modern society. Troubled sleep is considered both a predictive sign and a symptoms of many illnesses and is associated with substantial decrements in the quality of life. Our first objective is to identify the mean score of stress for different genders, marital status, and occupation. The second objective is to examine whether lifestyle, sleep quality, hygiene, and environment affect an individual's score of stress. The scope of the study focused around working adults in Johor Bahru. The data collection method that was used in this study is an online questionnaire, which is the most suitable method of collecting data throughout this pandemic. The data was collected using an online survey, which is Google Form. Information obtained from this research will benefit the workers, researchers, and institution for the knowledge and future practice. The workers will be able to know the factors of sleep that could affect their stress level, such as sleep quantity, lifestyle, environment, and hygiene. Workers who are always suffering from fatigue, stress, and physically and mentally burnt out could potentially find that lack of sleep could be the cause.
Next, we move to methodology. The research design that used in this study is causal design. The target population is workers in Johor Bahru, which is approximately 700,000 workers. By using Craigie and Morgan table, the recommended sample is 384. However, this study only managed to get 387 respondents as the sample. This study used non-probability sampling, which is noble sampling. This is because it is fast, inexpensive, and easy to conduct. Workers in Johor Bahru who had an access to online questionnaire will be chosen as the sample of this study. The data collection method that used in this study is online self-administered questionnaire. As for the research instrument, were adopted from sleep survey question, home sleeping condition and sleep quality, Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index, and lastly, Sleep Hygiene Index.
Next, for the checking assumption, first detecting linear relationship between the dependent and independent variable. Use the scatter plot to check. This is an example of the graph of scatter plot. To check this assumption, the closer the different data points fall to the line, the more accurate the model. The second assumption is normality. By using normal probability plot, it can infer if the data comes from a normal distribution. One of the best ways to examine the normality is by using kurtosis and skewness. The third assumption is consistency of the error variance. Can be examined by using the plot of residuals against the predicted values. These assumptions means that the variance around the regression line is the same for all values of the predictor variables. By looking at the example figure, the point must be about the same distance from the line, and it shows the error variance is constant since it's lying between 0.5 and negative 0.75. When the error variance is constant, hence there is homozygosity. The fourth assumption is the presence of the outliers. Data points that are far from other data points are outliers. This is an example of histogram of Cook's distance with outliers. To detect the outliers, the Cook's distance value are calculated by using this formula. By using the formula, if the Cook's distance value is more than the calculated formula value, then the data will be deleted. After deleting data, the step is of the checking outliers is repeated. This is example of histogram of Cook's distance without outliers. It shows there is no outliers since there is no distance between graph. The fifth assumption is multicollinearity. There are two methods that can be used to detect the multicollinearity, which are from the variance inflation factor VIF and tolerance statistic. Since all the assumptions are fulfilled, therefore there is no need to proceed with the last assumption, which is transformation.
And now we move on to chapter analysis. Our first objective, which is to identify the mean score of stress for different genders, marital status, and occupations. According to the perceived score of stress, there are three levels of stress, which are low from 0 to 13, moderate 14 to 26, and high 27 to 40. As for females, the mean score is 16.95, which shows that most female respondents have a moderate stress level. Males, however, have a mean score of 16.68, which is not too far of a gap from the females. It means that they also have a moderate stress. Next is the mean score of stress of respondents depending on their marital status. It is shown that respondents who are single have a mean score of stress of 18.72, which is the highest mean compared to respondents who are married and those who prefer not to say. Next, the marital status that gets the lowest mean score of stress, which is 15.20, are respondents who are married. Lastly, the score of stress of respondents who chose to not disclose their marital status has a mean score of 15.56. As a conclusion, all of the respondents have a moderate score of stress. Lastly, for occupation, people who work at a private job have the highest mean score of stress compared to working in a government job and owning their own business, which is 17.60. Respondents who own their own business also has a mean score of 16.55, which is a moderate score. And lastly, the people who work at a government job has the lowest mean score of stress compared to the other two, which is 15.81. In conclusion, all three categories for occupation have moderate score of stress. As a conclusion, different genders, marital status, and occupations have different mean score of stress, but they all have a moderate stress level. The highest stress level is also moderate, which is for female, single, and work in a private job.
There are 5 assumptions of linear regression that need to be fulfilled. First, the assumption of outliers. Look at before histogram of Cook's distance. It shows the histogram of the Cook's distance has an outlier. To fulfill this assumption, some of the data have to be deleted to make the histogram of the Cook's distance have no outliers. It can be done by calculating the value manually using the formula. Since the Cook's distance value is more than the value calculated using the formula, so there are 30 data have been deleted and then recheck again for the outlier. Next, look for after histogram. It shows the histogram of the Cook's distance after data cleaning. It shows there is no outliers since there is no distance between graphs. Therefore, the data has no outliers and the first assumption is fulfilled. Second, the assumption of linearity between independent variables and dependent variable. First scatter plot, it is lifestyle against PSS. It shows that this scatter plot has a positive association and the relationship between two variables is considered a weak relationship since the R value is 0.0x6. Second scatter plot, it is environment against PSS. This scatter plot has a positive association and the relationship between two variables is considered a weak relationship since the R value is 0.019. Third scatter plot, it is SHI against PSS. This scatter plot shows a positive association, and the relationship between two variables is generally a weak relationship when the R value is 0.242. The last scatter plot, it is PSQI against PSS. This scatter plot shows a positive association, and the relationship between two variables is a weak relationship since the R value is 0.147. Therefore, all the linearity independent and dependent variables that have a positive relationship are said to be equal and fulfilled as the second assumptions of multiple linear regression. Third assumption of normality. The table shows the absolute values of the skewness and kurtosis. Since the total respondent is above 300, the data is considered as normal since the value of skewness is lower than 2 and kurtosis lower than 7. Next assumption is consistency of error variance. This scatter plot shows of predicted value against residual. The plot of residuals against predicted values can be used to examine the error variance, constant or homoscedasticity. It shows the error variance is constant since it is lying between 2 and -4. There is homoscedasticity since the error variance is constant. The last assumption is multicollinearity. By using the value from tolerance and variance inflation factor, it shows that for tolerance value are more than 0.2 and for variance inflation factor, all the values are less than 10 and the result shown proves that there is no multicollinearity.
Since all the assumption of multiple linear regression achieved, so next we can proceed to our second objective to examine lifestyle, environment, sleep quality and hygiene that affect an individual's score of stress. The p-value for each of the variable are checked whether the value is more or less than the alpha value, which is 0.05. The reason being, if the p-value is more than the alpha value, it means that the variable does not affect an individual's score of stress. From the table, we can see clearly that the variable lifestyle and environment are not significant because the p-value is more than alpha, which is 0.377 and 0.435 respectively. Therefore, lifestyle and environment do not affect an individual's score of stress. As for Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index (PSQI) and Sleep Hygiene Index (SHI), the table shows that the p-value for both variables are less than alpha 0.05. Hence, the variables are significant. The p-value for PSQI and SHI are 0.003 and 0.00 respectively. We can conclude that from the four factors above, only Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index and Sleep Hygiene Index that affect an individual's score of stress. The inspiration behind this study was when COVID-19 pandemic took over the world in 2020 and almost everyone had to work from home, which could be stressful since it was a new way of working for almost 2 years. There are 4 factors that have been explored in this study, which are environment, lifestyle, sleep quality and hygiene. A total of 387 respondents have been responded to the online questionnaire and automatically been chosen as the sample in this study. About 59.4% of the respondents, which is around 230 people, stated they are not working remotely, while 40.6% respond they are working remotely. As for the recommendation, this study only focused in Johor Bahru. If this study expanded, the findings can turn out be different since different states had different restrictions when the Movement Control Order MCO. A bigger and busier city like Kuala Lumpur would maybe have a different score of stress compared to suburbs in Selangor such as Banting and Kuala Selangor. There also could be the other factors that could affect their score of stress other than anything related to sleep, such as place of stay, transportation and commute hour. The method of snowball sampling, which is a non-probability sampling, also was a huge help since one respondent can spread the questionnaire to the people around them that fit the criteria of the study. When starting this study, Johor Bahru was still in a conditional movement control order (CMCO) state where some people were still working from home, which could be a more stressful environment. If the study were were to be done in JB during the recovery period, the result might be differ. Lastly, the finding of this study could be a measure for companies to do a biannual checkup of their workers. The stress score of worker could also affect the performance of his or her work. Therefore, everyone should work together to prevent from getting too stressful so that the performance of work in the department or organisation could be maximized. I'd like to finish today's presentation with this quote that sleep is the best meditation. Thank you for taking your time to hear our presentation and Assalamualaikum.